as humans on Earth? That's a big question, right? It's a question that my student asked me. I'm an elementary school teacher and a parent, and I hear kids ask big questions all the time. Kids are natural questioners, and in ways they're natural philosophers. And they're onto something, because big questions are the first step to learning, to solving the problems of the world, and finding meaning in our lives. So why are we here? In all the universe, of all the things that you could have ended up being, you're not a fish or a worm or a fleck of dust at the edge of the galaxy. You're human, an extraordinary and powerful being, and you've got all these gifts inside you, every one of you. And these gifts are so great, and I like to think of them as like superpowers, because you can use them to shape reality. You've got the power to reason, and the power to feel, and show compassion, and the power to create and make meaning, and it's the power to question, which is at the genesis of these other powers. It's like the jet fuel that rockets these powers to higher levels. So I want to talk to you today about the power to question. This September, I had a new group of grade 6 and 7 students, and after recess, they flew in off the playground, and we got into a circle. And I asked, hey, have you guys got any big questions? Let's collect some ideas. And then I passed around a little audio recorder. And this is what they shared.
I was wondering, why does it take so long to make friends and so quickly to make enemies?
Are people born the way they are, or does the world around them shape their inside feelings and stuff?
What truly is fear? What is pure happiness?
Or why am I human?
I've been wondering about if I were to die right now, what would the people who knew me would do?
Why was I born and what is my purpose in life?
How do you know that you've fulfilled your purpose in life?
Why can't we all be happy?
Why are so many people taking things for granted?
Why do adults always pretend that nothing bad is happening in the world?
Why? Just why?
So kids ask big questions. Yeah, thank you for them. So think about your own questions. Like, do you remember those big questions you would ask? I remember being 7 years old, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and the sun is shining down on me, and I've got my paper and felt pens, and I'm hard at work making this little blue book. And on the front cover, I wrote, Life by Tiffany. It was a pretty ambitious first publication. But that's the thing about kids, is they're curious and they're willing to ask. And I wanted to know, what is life about? The big question started early for me. Around when I was 5 years old, my dad took a job as a forest firefighter. He was brave and courageous, and he loved nature. And before he left for training, he took me aside and told me that he loved me and he was going to get me a gift. And then his helicopter crashed, and we lost him. And in all my searching for the meaning in this, I decided that I could still find a gift. And I think it was this: the courage to ask big questions and the knowledge of how precious life is. And I had a lot of questions, like you guys did growing up. But I learned pretty quickly in school that regular school isn't typically the place for kids' big questions, because it's more about us copying down the right answers, right? But then when I got to university, I took this course called philosophy. And it was mind-blowing, because all of a sudden, here was an academic discipline all about developing big questions, and with other people who were all just as curious as I was. And the questions of philosophy were fun and meaningful, like, well, is there objective truth? What is reality? What is the meaning of life? What should we do to make the world a better place? And on that question, I want to stop right there, because it's a question that we can tackle. The question of how to make the world a better place. Well, let's just kind of reverse engineer that. We can first ask what results do we want to see? What specific results do we want to see? And then just take the right actions to get those results. But how do we know which actions are right to take? Well, our actions will emerge from our ideas. And that's where people often get caught up. They think, well, I just don't have any ideas. I'm not very original. But we have power over this process because ideas come from somewhere too. Very often, they emerge from our questions. So what kind of questions are we asking on a daily basis? Are they big questions? Are they meaningful, meaty questions that are going to set us on that path that we want to get the results that we need? I like to think about questions in this way. There's this quote by John Chardy, and he says, "A good question is not a bolt to be tightened into place, but a seed to be planted and to bear more seed toward the hope of greening the landscape of idea." Good questions are seeds full of potential. And what I learned in philosophy is if we plant these seeds in good logic and reasoning and nurture them with creativity and care and with other people, we can grow them into real wisdom, real meaning, real change for the world. And there are beautiful examples all over. I want to share with you this story of this little boy named Craig, who at 12 years old, he's a Canadian kid, he was reading the newspaper and he found out that in parts of the world, kids are sold into slavery and do child labor. And a question emerged: why? And a very practical and very philosophical question came to his mind at 12 years old: what should he do about it? And his answer was to gather his brother Mark and school friends, and together they created Free the Children, which grew into a now international charity with more than 1.7 million youth involved in 45 countries, and they're getting results. Craig Kielberger, he's an adult now, but he was a kid when he started. And that's the thing. Every great man or woman was once a child first. Here's another example. A little boy named Michael grew up in this house in the 1930s and 40s in Atlanta, Georgia. And one time, he joined his family on a trip to the local shoe store. And the white business owner there wouldn't serve them at the front of the store. This is the time of racial segregation and the Jim Crow laws. So think about that experience as a child. He thought about that. He saw what was going on around in his world. And he asked, why this injustice? And that question grew into an idea, a dream. And he took action. He took the name Martin Luther King Jr., and he led the world and inspired millions. And he told us to never stop speaking out and questioning, because our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. So how do we nurture that kind of power to question in our kids and in ourselves? I think about that a lot because I've got these kids in my class asking all these big questions, and I think I could be looking at the next Martin Luther King Jr. I've got this one student, Kelly, she's 10 years old, and she loves animals, and she's always asking big questions like, well, how do we know animals don't have feelings like us? And shouldn't we treat animals better? I've got another student, Ishak, he's 9 years old. He newly moved to Canada from Iraq, and we had an earthquake drill once, and he came up to me afterward and said, Miss Poirier, when I was in overseas and in kindergarten, sometimes our school would shake, but it wasn't an earthquake. It was just the bombs down the road. Why do people fight wars? Kids ask big questions all the time, and what do we do about it? What do we do about it? They see it. The curtain is pulled back, and they get a sense of the world. And we can't always protect them from reality. So how do we prepare them for it? How do we nurture their questions? I want to share with you something that has been so inspiring and meaningful for my students, and here it is. Community of inquiry. This is an approach that has come from the Philosophy for Children movement, and it's something that we've been working on to nurture our kids' questions. And the idea is this: what if we take kids' big questions, we put them at the center of learning, and then we give them time and space and tools to address their questions meaningfully and with other kids? There are many ways to do this work, and there are so many educators out there right now in this growing movement doing an amazing job of this, and I wanted to share with you a little bit about how it might look in a classroom. So in our class, typically, we'll start off by sitting in a circle so that the kids can see one another eye to eye as equals. And then we'll invite them to generate their questions. What questions are on their minds? What are they seeing? And we always come up with way more questions than we can handle in any one dialogue setting. So we'll keep them in our question jar and make sure we return to them later, because all these questions matter. And then the kids dialogue, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Giving them the time and space and tools just to step back and watch that. They challenge each other, but they're intelligent and peaceful. And as the educator, I'm there, it's like the guide on the side, I'm there to facilitate, to nurture the dialogue, their dialogue. I don't share my own opinions because it's not what it's about. It's about giving them the space to grow what they've got. And I'll teach them different dialogue moves they can make, like how to ask a philosophical question, what's the difference between philosophical and empirical questions, how to form a hypothesis, how to develop a well-reasoned argument and identify logical fallacies. And this is very applicable when they're encountering the media and politics. And then they take this knowledge and they take it on in their own ways. And we like to bring it to life because kids learn in different ways, so we've got to appeal to all those different multiple intelligences. Something that we like to do to help track the dialogue is we might use a talking stick or a dialogue web, where you start with a ball of yarn and you roll it around as ideas are made. And it helps kids to stay focused and also see the interconnectedness of their ideas. In one dialogue, we asked, what are the building blocks of a better society? And everyone had their idea. We shared it in the circle. And then they wanted to build this symbolic village. And they got blocks and they stacked them. And as they're doing this action and talking about what their ideas were and seeing how this idea depends on this idea, let's put it underneath, and they're growing this sense of a better world. And they thought, hey, we can build this if we each bring our own piece of the greater puzzle. And that's one of the amazing things about doing this work is kids start to see the bigger picture. And there's so many benefits from kids having this opportunity. We see there's a growing body of research showing that we're seeing gains in kids' critical thinking skills and creative thinking skills and communication skills. There's social emotional development, just the way they're relating to one another, and academic engagement. Sometimes there are those students who sit at the back of the class, a little bit cynical about what's going on. But when it's dialogue time, you see them lean into the conversation, because no matter what superpowers a kid has, there's a place for them in this dialogue. And the kids will tell you themselves a little bit about their experience.
I've changed because I used to be really shy, but now I'm not afraid to just say my opinion.
It's really helped me in my grades in that school. It helps me slow down and think more before I act.
If we have children learning philosophy at a young age, then when they're older, we're going to have a much better chance of them answering really big questions and resolving problems that people haven't been able to for a long time.
So there it is, your healthier democracy in the making. This is what we're headed for. This is what we're headed for. And why else are we here? Why are we here on this planet? Think about that newborn baby first opening her eyes to gaze at the wonder of life. And what do you hope for that little life? What kind of a world do we want to build for these kids? Can we build them communities of inquiry? I think about my son who's 2 years old already asking me why, why? Think about my students, and you think about your kids, the kids that you know in your neighborhood. What can we give to them? What can we build with them when they get a chance to see their superpowers? And know that their questions matter. Because maybe life is a question, and how we live it is our answer. So question. Do it for the kid you used to be. No matter who you are or where you are, you're still growing. You can go to a coffee shop today with a friend and sit down with the big question that's on your mind. What big question have you been thinking about? Sit down at the dinner table with family again and dialogue like it matters, because it does. When you start with a big question, you and I, everyone, we can grow something amazing. And remember, when we've arrived at the question, the answer is already near. Thank you.